Barakata Yahweh, Barakata Yahushai, Bayishim Raka Kodash, Barakatum. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, glory, and infinite honors to Yahweh Bayishim Yahushai. Double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone who rule and teach well. In peace and salutations to Ya'akim out there pushing this word in truth and sincerity to the four corners of the globe. May you brothers endure until the end. This is the Brother Ra'aya with another video, and I'll be reading from an article on MSN.com titled, European Leaders Warn Coronavirus Could Lead to the Breakup of Their Union. And whatever your opinion of this whole coronavirus situation is, there's one thing you can't deny, is that it's getting shit done. Most of the planet is under lockdown. You've got people's civil liberties being taken away, all in the name of national security. People are getting stir crazy, having to stay cooped up in their houses, which could lead to civil unrest. There's been an uptick in suicides due to the lockdown. There are talks of mass vaccinations, which could very well lead to the mandatory implementation of the Mark of the Beast, which is the RFID/NFC microchip implant. And as we'll see in this article, there are talks of the European Union breaking up, and these European Edomites are mistrustful towards one another. And it's all biblical prophecy. This is Daniel chapter 2. I'm going to read verse 40 to 42. And the fourth kingdom shall be strong as iron, speaking of the ancient Roman Edomite empire. For as much as iron breaketh in pieces and subdueth all things, and as iron that breaketh all these, shall it break in pieces and bruise. And whereas thou sawest the feet and toes, part of the potter's clay and part of iron, the last leg of the fourth kingdom, the reincarnated Roman Empire, the NATO-EU alliance, which the U.S. is a part of, the kingdom shall be divided. And as we'll see in that article, this kingdom is clearly divided. These European nations are dragging their feet and helping one another, and you've got one nation blaming another for not being prepared for this unforeseen coronavirus pandemic. And even before this whole coronavirus situation came about, the EU and NATO were on the decline. On the EU side, you had these citizens in these countries getting sick of the Union and wanting to go back to a separate nationalistic state, which is why you saw Brexit. And then there were talks of Frexit, and you had that whole situation in Catalonia, Spain. And with the way things are looking with this coronavirus situation, you could see even more exits from the European Union. And on the NATO side, you had these Europeans in NATO getting sick of the U.S., dragging them into foreign wars and having to deal with the blowback from those foreign wars, like the refugee crisis. And the U.S. is getting sick of these European nations in NATO not pulling their weight and paying for the costs of NATO. And as it says in Mark chapter 3, verse 24, and if a kingdom be divided against itself, that kingdom cannot stand. We're living in the last seconds of the rulership of Esau, Edom's kingdom. And all this is going to culminate in these European Edomites allying themselves with the Russian Edomites and turning against the U.S. and shooting 200 million nuclear missiles onto it, turning it into the biblical lake of fire from sea to shining sea, and then a desolate wasteland afterwards. But that's a different topic for another day. But there shall be in it of the strength of iron, talking about these Edomites as military might, because these Edomites still have some of the most powerful militaries on the planet, which goes back to their blessing being the sword in Genesis chapter 27. For as much as thou sawest the iron mixed with miry clay, and as the toes of the feet were part of iron and part of clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly broken. And this is talking about how some of the nations of the last leg of this fourth kingdom are more powerful than the others, like Germany, France, Britain, and the U.S. being more powerful than the pigs nations, Portugal, Italy, Ireland, Greece, and Spain. And this is another reason why this kingdom is being divided, because these stronger nations are getting sick of having to pull the weight of these weaker nations and pay for their fiscal irresponsibility. We're seeing the curses of Deuteronomy 28 hit these heathens hard. As it says in Deuteronomy 30 verse 7, and Yahweh thy power will put all these curses upon thine enemies. And what's one of the curses of Deuteronomy 28 we're seeing befall these Edomites, or so-called white people? The curse in Deuteronomy 28 verse 54, so that the man that is tender among you and very delicate, his eye shall be evil toward his brother. A kingdom divided cannot stand. A house divided cannot stand. These European Edomites are mistrustful towards one another and dragging their feet and helping one another during this coronavirus situation and blaming each other for not being more prepared. And also these European Edomites have an evil eye towards their U.S. Edomite brothers because they're sick of feeling all the blowback from U.S. military adventurism abroad, and toward the wife of his bosom, and toward the remnant of his children, which he shall leave. And Yahweh thy power will put all these curses upon thine enemies, and on them that hate thee, which persecuted thee, which is chiefly you Edomites. The Most High hasn't forgotten what you Edomites have done to the apple of his eye in the past with Antiochus Epiphanes, or the Roman siege of Jerusalem in 70 AD, through the transatlantic slave trade and slavery, to civil rights in America, as well as Jim Crow, the crack era, the war on drugs, and all the way up until today with these Edomite cops shooting down Israelite men, women, and children dead in the streets, as well as you Edomites putting poisonous food and water in our neighborhoods and putting Planned Parenthoods in our neighborhoods to advocate for our women getting abortions. Once the Israelites get their hands on you Edomites in the kingdom of heaven, we're going to do double unto you as you've done unto us, but of course all in righteousness. And this is all a very beautiful sight to behold, Akim, as it says in Ecclesiasticus, or Sirach in the Apocrypha, chapter 25, how beautiful it is to see the downfall of your enemies. So now more than ever, Akim, you should have that fire in your spirit to be pushing this word as hard as you can, to make your calling and election sure, and be of that elect number, to be the first fruits in the kingdom of heaven, to have first dibs at putting your foot in the ass of these heathens and bashing them over the head with that rod of iron. But let's get back to that article. Berlin, the coronavirus pandemic, with its simultaneous health and economic crisis, is deepening the fault lines within Europe in a way some leaders fear could prove to be the final reckoning. The cohesion of the European Union had been battered by Brexit, bruised by the political fallout from the 2015 migration surge and the 2008 financial crisis, and challenged by rising autocracy in the East that runs contrary to the professed ideals of the European project. Now, if Europe's leaders cannot chart a more united course, the project lies in what one of its architects described this week as mortal danger. In the early days of the coronavirus outbreak, the response among European Union member states showed that national interests trump more altruistic European ideals. Border restrictions were reimposed haphazardly, and Germany and France, that part of iron, threw up export bans on medical equipment such as masks and ventilators, even as Italy, that part of clay, clamored for assistance. Quick to capitalize were the propaganda machines of Russia and China. Moscow and Beijing have swept in with much trumpeted, if sometimes defective, medical aid, pushing a savior narrative and providing fodder for the region's Eurosceptics. EU countries have begun to coordinate their efforts to procure supplies, and they have sent more aid to hard-hit Italy than China has. But the past week has seen a reemergence of a north-south rift over how to handle the economic response. The kingdom shall be divided. The Union is also being pulled east and west, as Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban has used emergency powers to effectively suspend democracy, riding roughshod over Europe's basic principles of the rule of law. Collectively, these tensions could overwhelm the alliance. This could be the straw that breaks the camel's back. Natalie Tucci, director of the International Affairs Institute in Italy, said, "The reason why coronavirus is such an epochal challenge is not that it brought things out of the blue. It touches on all spheres and does so by accentuating dynamics that are already there. It's as if it is bringing the extreme out of everything." Norbert Röttgen, a German politician jockeying to succeed Chancellor Angela Merkel, likened the continent's infighting to a grueling trench war as he joined the chorus of voices warning that the EU is in grave peril. The debate has indeed been bitter, after 9 countries, including Italy and Spain, requested financial support in the form of corona bonds, Dutch Finance Minister Wopke Hoekstra said Brussels should study why some governments lacked the financial wherewithal to fight the crisis on their own. That comment, made during a private conference call of EU finance ministers, touched off a firestorm since it sounded to critics as though the Dutch were trying to turn a health crisis whose origins had little to do with the actions of any European government into a fiscal morality play. Back in Deuteronomy 28 and 54, so that the man that is tender among you and very delicate, his eye shall be evil toward his brother. The remarks were repugnant, said Portuguese Prime Minister Antonio Costa. Either the EU does what needs to be done or it will end, he added. A separate video conference call last week among EU leaders, which was intended to be a fairly brief check-in, spiraled into unusually angry discussion and extended for more than 3 hours, diplomats familiar with the meeting said. The climate that seems to reign among heads of state and government and the lack of European solidarity, a kingdom divided, pose a mortal danger to the European Union. Jacques Delors, a 94-year-old French politician who played a leading role in the creation of the bloc's modern form, warned in a rare statement. The debate has reopened wounds that had just barely scarred over from the 2008 financial crisis, when Germany led Europeans in imposing painful austerity measures on Greece and Italy in exchange for financial assistance. Again, that evil eye towards your brother. Now with needs even more acute, some are left wondering if the richer EU countries are not willing to support their struggling neighbors. What's the point of membership at all? And as the toes of the feet were part of iron and part of clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly broken. That's pretty much it with that article. You get the point. So with this video, I hope you sincere Akim were edified. Just keep strong and keep pushing this word. We're almost out of this final wicked captivity of the heathens, chiefly Esau, Edom. And as always, I'm going to say Abad Babol, Kwam Yasharala. Till next time, Shalom.